Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's group conversation engineering dev, which is brand new, just with a brand new sub-department, which was just formed 2 weeks ago. And I'm very happy to do this today for the first time. It's a great transition, I have to say, and it's a great focus that we have now on the product side, and it feels really energizing. And I'm hoping for a lot of questions today, or that the presentation was explanatory enough. Yeah, please take a look, and I will dive right into the questions that are already here. So Sean, and this was not predefined, discussed that I'm getting a question from him, is that what's the hiring plan for Gitter? So yes, we have a couple of candidates quite far along. And our current target is to hire one more full stack engineer, that we see two people, that especially Eric has not a counterpart, but like a buddy, so that we have also easier flexibility on time off, etc. And then we see along the year how this works out, how good we can reach the targets, as the whole Gitter plan and roadmap is stabilizing now. So all the updates to the code base, there's a lot of open source contributions going on, etc. So that is really great to see. And now it's really that we can push along features, and that also should help us on having a tighter GitLab integration. And with that, we hope that we can also raise activity and more users there. Yes, Sean, another question. GraphQL meets only one API, but isn't there an element of there are 15 competing standards? Let me click that. Oh, it's there.
Yeah, it's the XKCD. Like there are 14 standards. We create a new standard to like replace them all, and now we just have 15 standards. You know.
Yes, that's a problem I've heard from some people. That's the nice thing, that we have just hired a couple of people who have already GraphQL production standard, also on bigger implementations. There is the definition and the philosophy about having no versioning on GraphQL, so that it's like a influx living document schema. And I think there are 2 or 3 competing standards, and that is, I think we even have an issue on that. That is that one of the open questions that we definitely have to answer and figure out along the way, how to do deprecation of things, how can we do this in a way that the GraphQL users, either us or also outside customers, are happy with it, informed, etc. But it's definitely easier to version and deprecate stuff.
Oh, sorry. What I meant was, like, we're talking about GraphQL replacing the internal APIs we have in Rails controllers and also the public REST API. But at the moment, we just have 3 APIs. We have the internal Rails controllers API, the public REST API, and the GraphQL. Like we haven't really got to a point where we've got one API. We've just got to a point where we've got 3 different levels of maturity and documentation.
Yeah. No, I think that's a nice, there was a great suggestion. I'm really sorry that I forgot from whom it was in one of the meetings for GraphQL, and there is an issue. It should be also linked in the epic, which is one of the tasks that we want to look in, is like reverse proxy, which means that as soon as we have GraphQL in place, that we recreate some of the REST API endpoints from the public API that we still want to support over a longer period of time. So I think internal API endpoints we can easily deprecate, because we simply deprecate them and replace them with GraphQL. And what some have done, and with quite good success, because there are also some proxy servers in reality for GraphQL, is like you create a REST API endpoint, which is simply doing a specific query against GraphQL. And through that, you still have the API endpoint to the outside world, but you don't have any code for it, because it's just proxying to the GraphQL. So that is one of the strategies that is definitely, I think, quite a nice thing to do for a long-term solution for still supporting REST, but going with something that is more unified in our code base.
Hey, Tim, I had a question. It seems like I saw in some issues that needing to deploy a node runtime was a blocker to adopting GraphQL in the way that we wanted to. Is there some progress on that? I wonder if you could comment on that.
Not really. So the GraphQL endpoint that would be new to me is really based on Rails. Has nothing to do with Node, as far as I know. We are using even the same gem that GitHub, Shopify, and a couple of others are using. So it's 100% Rails based. We are starting nothing new. We are really building on the controllers and the code that we already have, and simply expose it through GraphQL. That's the nice part. So that's really nice to see that we don't need to start anything from scratch. So please, if you have the issue number or something, let me know, and I'm very happy to dig in and clarify that.
Yeah, I'll grab that.
Cool. Mark Panzak, the FY20 plan has only one person hit the total. Is there a disconnect here? Yes, that could be because the target for hiring a Gitter person is already coming from last year. So it could be that there wasn't anything transferred over. I will have a look at it. Thanks for that. And thanks a lot to Sean for keeping up the agenda so nicely. Any other questions in verbal form?
So Tim, we have a managed team. We also have a fulfillment team, which focuses more on like the billing aspects and the license ordering. That used to be done by the managed team, but the fulfillment team is probably under enablement now. How do you see that? Will that split cause problems because they report up to a different director, or how do you see that?
I think on the long term, it will definitely give the managed team a much better and higher focus, as managed really brought up more and more topics. So bringing that out into fulfillment and having then specific engineers and also on the long run engineering managers for specifically that stuff, I think is a good thing. Manage has so many open topics, but I think it's good that we have at the moment, for example, Dennis, who is really delivering also the smooth transition over into the enablement. But so far I've heard only the best especially from the engineering side, that they are very happy that they were able to give out a topic that is another big thing inside the manager to have really better focus there.
On a day-to-day basis as well, we've had Ruben move across from managed to fulfillment. And he is certainly sort of subject matter expert for all things fulfillment. So he's certainly going to make sure things are in safe hands and help grow that team out as well.
Thanks.
Thanks to William, I think. I can't, yeah, I see the name now, for bringing up the issue. I will have another look and perhaps close it. Oh, it was already closed, so cool.
In other companies, I've witnessed that GraphQL is still pretty early, and they're running into a lot of snags, and that I got the feeling that although there's a lot of advantages to it, it didn't increase their development speed.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the security is trickier because it's less defined what you do. So there's people doing, for example, giving only a materialized view of the database so that you restrict what people can query in the beginning. What do you think about these development speed and security challenges of GraphQL?
Yeah, so I think with the throughput, I think we can definitely raise a lot of topics with GraphQL on our side, and I've linked also in one of the later slides. Let me take a look which one it was. I think number 16, there are some links to other companies and their experiences with GraphQL. The main thing was really the resolving a lot of dependency stuff. So right now, if we have a smaller topic and it's suddenly something that a front-end engineer needs to access just part of the query, a backend engineer needs also to come in. They create most of the time a new endpoint. Another endpoint is created that also need to be maintained, etc. And in the future, we don't need that anymore, simply in the fact of that the front-end person can write their query, which is specific to their use case. So this reduces the dependency between those two teams, which gives the front-end a little bit more flexibility, and the back-end, on the other hand, more focus on specific topics according to the endpoint, and reduces also maintainability. So especially with a lot of the use cases, we have seen that throughput is raised through that, especially on the front end. The other part is, and that is also one of the biggest topics and concerns that we are trying to resolve currently in this Q1 OKR, is really to resolve the bigger questions around authorization, authentication. How can we prevent that someone is simply doing a complete database dump in reality from through a GraphQL query? So this is done through performance points on a query. So every query gets some performance cost, and you can only query to up to a certain amount of points and stuff like that. So those are really the main questions. I would say it's 80% of the questions that we are trying to resolve now, and this in the next release cycle are mainly backend. The front-end topic was mainly about state management and how to do nice blueprints, how to have a good developer experience so that you can easily write a query, simply take it and copy it into code. So we were looking at different tools apart from GraphQL, so that you have auto-completion on those things in VS Code. And security-wise, we are working closely with the security team early on to really minimize any risk by exposing more. As we are simply, and that is something we need to keep also very close eye on it, and that's why we want to have a lot of blueprints, a lot of helping things, is because we are transferring the analysis and the strategy of the query from the backend to the front end. So it can happen, of course, that suddenly a front-end engineer is writing a complete super complex query, which is like taking 2 minutes every time you call it. And that shouldn't happen. And that's something we need to figure out along the way. How can we do this during development, that we figure out on a bigger scale, this query will not work. So what we currently have in place for backend engineers, which is like the database review, that we have the same thing in place for front-end engineers in the future steps, that they can have like a review of new GraphQL queries, etc. I hope that answered most of your question.
And addressed a lot. I think that companies are a bit hesitant to post about GraphQL failure stories, because like right now it's a cool thing to do. It's on the peak of inflated expectations. I think it's a good direction long term, but I'm seeing when you talk privately with people, I'm hearing some big challenges where the tooling isn't ready, where the security, that kind of the sandboxing of the queries is much harder, and people are developing custom solutions to that. So we should try to get a few of those stories out of other people. I don't think we can just rely on blog posts, because everyone's reluctant to post that they're struggling in GraphQL because it's the cool and new thing to do.
Absolutely. And we are also having an eye on new hires, because we just hired in the front end, I think now 3-4 people who have actual production experience on also bigger scales with GraphQL, that bring us also tons of knowledge into the team. But you're totally right. Most people write about the nice things, and
Do you think we need proprietary tools? Like there's a startup called Apollo that has a lot of nice proxying servers and things like that. Do we need that, or can we live with just the open source tooling?
Right now, everything that we are using is open source. We are using the same gem that also GitHub is using, that Shopify and a couple of other huge GraphQL implementations is already using in production. So everything new that GitHub is already using is built on top of that. That shows us that there's a lot of activity in that stuff, and we don't need to rewrite anything. The same is that we are using View Apollo, which is working on some of the client, exactly as Lucas wrote, the open source library in the front end. That we are using is Apollo. So I think right now from the tooling side, we have a good combination. The proxy server could be something. There are 2 free open source tools out there at the moment, but definitely something that we need to take a look at.
Cool, thanks.
Hey Tim, it's Mac here. I had a question on API direction in general, because I can see us requesting more REST APIs to set up test data for GitLab QA and such. On slide 15, you're saying that long-term REST APIs can build on top of GraphQL. So are you saying that any new REST API requests will be built on top of GraphQL, or what's your direction here?
Yeah, the idea is that we simply replace all the REST API endpoints that we currently have in place that we still want to support for a very long time, that we simply replace them by proxied requests to GraphQL. So if we see that a customer needs still REST and they want to use REST, there are a couple of tools that are pretty easy to configure to simply, because in reality, a REST call is nothing else than a GraphQL call with a specific query with a specific result set. And that is something that we could, so that we are able to replace actually the Rails code to minimize the maintenance and also security topics and security access area. So I think that could be quite a viable strategy to reduce, then as soon as everything is ready for GraphQL, that we reduce on the other hand all the REST code. And so far the backend engineers that I talk with are very happy about the idea behind that, to simply reduce that part.
Got it. Thanks.
Mark, slide 2 shows Git as a separate stage bucket, but FY20 plan and current categories put Git as part of criteria. But part of create stage. Yeah, in my slides, I simply put it as one side, as it doesn't have like counterpart. So it's a different topic and it's not directly connected to the others. And is currently not under create in my opinion. But I will definitely have a look at it to see if we need to clarify some parts in the handbook there. As I think the connection to create is there to some extent, but it's a separate thing in my opinion.
Well, if you disagree with that, then definitely start a conversation about that, because the current single source of truth says it is part of create, but just a different create.
Kefi, how is the hiring pipeline looking for Manage? Manage is one of the teams that could use more help with resolving security vulnerabilities from your slides. How many of the 6 IC headcounts are currently on board? I'm pretty sure Liam can tell much more in detail and much better than I can do on that stuff.
Thanks, Tim. At the moment, we have 5 backend engineers in Manage, and the pipeline is looking quite strong, actually. I was talking to Tommy about this earlier. It's as strong as it's looked for a while. We have 1 candidate at reference checks, and then I think we have 7 or 8 in the pipeline. So hopefully we can fulfill the target of 6 in the coming weeks, then we'll be in a good position to complete for the rest of the year as well. And then I don't know, I just saw Dennis's note. I don't know if there's anything to share on front end separately.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Good, Kathy.
Oh, I was just going to say that that's good, because it seems like a quarter ago, there were really only 2 ICs contributing for Manage, which was problematic because there was a backlog for security fixes. So that's good news.
Yeah, it's really positive. I think we had Geisha and Pavel join us earlier in this month, and I think with other changes that are happening as well, with the scope of Manage becoming more focused with the fulfillment team, for example, yeah, we're certainly going to be able to put more capacity into solving some of the security issues we have in the backlog.
Right.
Thank you. So any more verbal questions? Then thank you, everyone, and have a great day, and see you in 10 minutes in the company call.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Take care.